Hey everyone, you're here sewing with Cody and Pete, and we are finally at the end of our Lazy Star Quilt Along, and we are going to finish up with the very last block. This is the smallest block in our quilt that we're working with, but remember, every block that we've done and every block you can do them in 6 different sizes. I chose to try and mix it up with a few different sizes, and this last one is the smallest size. So this is our last block and one of the easiest blocks we have to do. It may be a little bit more challenging because it is smaller pieces, but we're going to work with it anyway. So remember, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let's take a closer look at the very last block. Alright, so here we are, we're at the cutting table, and we have to cut our pieces for our very last block. So we're working with the smallest block that you can pretty much make with our lazy angle ruler. So previously we've done multiple different sizes. The last 6 blocks that we've done, we've worked with the 2.5 inch strips. Now we're actually working with 1.5 inch strips. And so we're working with fabric A, fabric B, and the background fabric, and that's all we need. So and all we're going to do is let's make the two cuts that we've been making. So let's start with our background fabric. So I've already cut the 2.5 inch strips. I've already cut the 1.5 inch strips for our 3 colors. And now the white background fabric, for me, we're going to cut 1.5 inch large trapezoids. And we need 16 of these because this smaller block has 16 even smaller blocks that make up this single block. So we're going to cut our 1.5 inch large trapezoids, and I do have this fabric doubled, so that gives me 2. We'll rotate the ruler, we'll cut 2 more, and we just keep rotating it until we get our 16, actually. Right, so here are my 16 background pieces out of my large trapezoid. So now we need 8 small trapezoids from fabric A and 8 small trapezoids from fabric B. And to do that, just like we've done with all the other small trapezoids, we'll just cut this little section here. All right, so because my fabric's doubled, those are my 8 small trapezoids from fabric A, and now we'll cut 8 from fabric B. All right, so that's the majority of the work. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go and sew all of this together. So we're going to have our large trapezoid from our background fabric, and we're going to sew all these little pieces. So we're going to sew the 8 fabric B to 8 background fabrics, and we should have 8 more background fabrics left, and we'll sew the remainder 8 fabric A pieces to that. So I'll go sew all these together, and I'll press them, and I'll come back and I'll show you what we need to do next. But that's almost it. All right, so I've got all 8 fabric A background, fabric B background all sewn together. and pressed. So the only thing we really need to do before we start sewing these squares together is to square them off, really, because we've got all these little, like little dog ears, those little points. So if we go and just trim all those off, just so everything is nice and clean, then we'll be able to arrange them how we need, and we can sew them all together. All right, so now I've got all our pieces. So now let's arrange them. So here are our four corners. Here are our sides. And then the center pieces. It's going to look kind of weird in the beginning, but once you sew them all together, it's really going to come together. So as you can see, you've got like a little pinwheel in the center, and then this, it's hard to see, but it kind of makes like a little star. And these are just for the corners. All right, so I'm going to sew each row together, all my four little pieces to make each row. And I end up with the 4 rows, and then I'll sew those 4 rows together, and we'll see our finished product. So I'll go sew these together, and I'll meet you back here, and we'll put those, line up those rows and see how they look. All right. All right, here we are. I've got each row nicely sewn together, or the 4 pieces of each row sewn together. So now all I have to do is sew these rows together, line up all my points, or all my seams, and I'll have my finished little block. And so what I did was, so when I sewed all the pieces together, when I did press them, I pressed each row going the opposite direction from the previous row. So like this row, all the pieces are pressed to the left. This row, all the pieces are pressed to the right. This one's all the way to the left, and these are all to the right. When it comes to something like this, we really can't really worry too much about pressing to the dark side or to the light side, because we've got so many pieces. It's not even really worth it. It's just easier and more important to notch those seams together. So when we're dealing with something like this, one row gets pressed one way, the other row gets pressed the opposite direction, and you just kind of alternate that way. So I'll go and I'll sew these rows together, I'll press them, and I'll bring them back and I'll show you what we have finished. All right, we are almost done. I told you this was a very quick block. It's just dealing with smaller pieces can be a little bit more challenging than dealing with larger pieces. All right, so here we are, our finished little square. And so here is the smallest square that we have in our entire block, our entire quilt. And it's using the 1.5 inch markings on our lazy angle ruler, using 1.5 inch strips. And this pattern is different. It's different from any of the other ones. It doesn't give you a true distinct star except for the little guy in the middle, that little pinwheel. But that's it. So we have finished all of the blocks for the Lazy Star Quilt Along quilt. So stay tuned for the construction using all of our blocks to construct the quilt. And we'll work on quilting it as well using the rulers. All right, so if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more videos dealing with our Lazy Star quilt. All right, as always, happy sewing.